Okay, so along with the new 24-105 f2.8L lens, which is a really exciting lens, we also have another lens from Canon, the RF 200-800mm f6.3-9 IS lens. And this has got to be, or at least it feels like, probably one of the more flexible telephoto zoom lenses that I have ever used. 200-800mm just is such a great focal range to play around with. There's so much there to use. 200mm is surprisingly wide when you're considering, 200-800mm, and 800mm just pushes past that 600mm that you would normally expect to kind of zoom to, and actually just gives you a little bit more reach. I mean, we're talking about an extra 200mm, and that really makes a lot of wildlife stuff just a little bit easier to get in very, very close to your subject. And with image stabilization in the lens as well, which works extremely well, that allows you to use some slightly slower shutter speeds for your photography if your subject is nice and still. And if your subject's moving very fast, I was using this with the R5, I've got this on the R5 here, it doesn't actually matter as much as it used to. And when you first see, f6.3 to f9, you're kind of thinking, well, how usable is that? But these days, you can bump up the ISO on something like the R5 to just very high levels without it really being a problem. And I got to test that very well because the weather, while I've had this lens to review, has been unbelievably bad. It's been incredibly dark, constantly. Raining, cloud, really, really difficult conditions to go out and use a lens like this. So it's been really interesting to actually put it through its paces given those circumstances. It's also worth noting this is compatible with the 1.4 times and the 2 times RF extenders, which gives you, you could be using 1600mm with this lens, that's wild stuff. That is absolutely wild stuff. And you'll be able to get some really interesting shots doing stuff like that. So let's talk about the lens itself, then we'll talk about the images as well. Now, like I say, I've had this on the front of the R5. It's a lot lighter than I thought it would be, considering both the size of it and what it's capable of. It does feel quite good in the hands. I never felt even for a second like it was problematic or like I was straining my arms or anything like that. I was quite happy walking around shooting handheld, trying to take photos of birds and squirrels and all kinds of moving objects like that. It is an external zoom, so as you zoom, it does kind of pop out like that, which I guess is probably to be expected on a lens like this. I don't think that's a problem at all. But what I do like about that is you have got this additional control wheel here to make the zoom ring smoother or tighter to turn, depending on how much you want to be using it. Useful if you want to be able to just quickly and smoothly transition from 200 to 800. But if you want some more sort of granular control, actually switching that over to a tighter feel makes it easier to make smaller adjustments with the zoom ring. I really like that. It's a nice touch to a lens like this. Otherwise, you also have the control ring further down the lens, which I love to see on RF lenses like this. And that control ring also doubles up as a manual focus ring as well, which is an interesting choice because I guess you've definitely got room up here on the lens for a manual focus ring. But I suppose maybe with the lens hood on there and stuff like that, maybe you want to keep it a little bit more accessible to the hands. Maybe that's why Canon have chosen to go with that, but it works quite well like that. And then of course, all your controls for things like stabilization, your AF/MF switch, and 2 custom function buttons on there as well, one on the side and one on the top. Otherwise, it's a fairly sort of sleek design. You've just got the tripod collar on there as well, which of course you'd expect to see on a lens like this. But let's talk about the image quality, because that's probably the most important thing of any lens. Now, I've mostly been using this for wildlife because I'd imagine that the primary use for a lens like this is going to be stuff like wildlife, like sports. You could absolutely use it for landscape and stuff like that as well. It's really interesting to use a longer lens like this for that kind of thing. But the good news is the image quality looks really nice. The images are nice and sharp. You've got nice detail. Canon colors are always fantastic. And especially considering the conditions today that I've been shooting with have not been ideal, I've really enjoyed what I've been able to get out of this lens. And you're definitely able to capture some lovely images and video with a lens like this. And in fact, that image stabilization, which I touched on before, does make it a lot easier to shoot handheld video with this lens. Even if you're zoomed in 600mm, 800mm, it's a lot easier to get some nice, steady, smooth shots that almost look like they could have been on a tripod, just using it completely handheld, which is really useful to be able to do just out and about, because it just makes things so much easier, so much quicker. And especially if you're shooting wildlife, you don't always have time to set up a tripod and all that kind of stuff to just crack on with that. You just need to actually get the shot and then move on, because you can't control nature, right? you're just in the moment. You've got a super spectra coating on the lens itself as well, which really helps to reduce things like ghosting and flaring, and UD lens elements inside for higher image quality and reduced chromatic aberration as well. Something else which is incredibly important with a lens like this is of course the autofocus. Like I say, using it with the R5, trying to keep up with some faster moving subjects, so squirrels and small birds primarily. I had no problems at all with this autofocus. It features dual nano USM motors in the lens, which are nice and quick, nice and quiet. It's just not something I ever really even thought about because it would just lock on. It was very snappy. The tracking was no problem. Eye autofocus on squirrels and on birds worked perfectly. That's exactly what you want from an autofocus system. And if you're not even noticing the autofocus system at work, then it's just doing its job. And that's all you want. You want an autofocus system that you never even think about because it's just consistently fantastic. The lens is also weather resistant, weather sealed, which is, really useful for a lens like this because it is absolutely going to be out and about. There's always going to be different kinds of weather. I mean, just today while I've been shooting, it's been very rainy, very dark, very horrible. And having a lens that has those capabilities just makes it a lot easier to not have to worry about that, which is great. This is a very accessible telephoto zoom lens. And I think if you're looking for a telephoto zoom lens that's going to fulfill all kinds of different needs, this is a great one to look at. You can do an awful lot with this. It's very, very versatile. That focal range really allows you to capture all kinds of different things. And then on top of that, of course, you can use the extenders as well. I've really enjoyed using it. It's definitely worth checking out. You can see all of the spec, all of the pricing, all the fun stuff, everything you want to see by checking out the link down in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well because there's new content all the time. I'll see you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.